Chapter 23:16. Nanjin Shu paused and said hesitantly, "This counts, but it doesn't. At that time, I brought the seal of the first divine envoy to the illusionary god Sea. When I clashed with Shangguanyu, the aura of the first divine envoy gushed out from the seal and chased us out of the illusionary god Sea." The first oracle didn't show up? No. Nanjin Shu was puzzled. The first oracle is in charge of the illusionary god Sea. Even if he doesn't show up personally, he can easily find out everything that happens in the illusionary god Sea. Besides, such a small matter shouldn't require the first oracle to make a move, right? Actually, this matter might be a big deal to him and Chu Luiyue, but it was definitely nothing to the first oracle. The illusionary god Sea was boundless and vast. At most, the two of them were just messing around. Why would the first oracle make a special trip for this matter? Just the seal alone was enough to solve the problem. When you went to meet the first oracle, did you see him in person? The sixth oracle suddenly asked. Nanjin Shu hesitated. Outsiders thought that he had entered the courtyard and must have seen the first oracle. But in reality, he had just stood outside the door and said a few words. He didn't even see that person's shadow. He didn't dare to hide anything in front of the sixth oracle. As expected. The sixth oracle murmured as if he had expected this, but he also seemed a little unwilling. Nanjin Shu almost thought that he was hallucinating. Why did it sound like the sixth oracle wanted the first oracle to appear personally? And he seemed to have expected that the first oracle wouldn't meet him? You said that the first oracle came out to stop the two of you as soon as the conflict broke out? Nanjin Shu described the situation at that time. Of course, he added some details, but he didn't know that Mo Shiqian was completely uninterested behind the screen. What he wanted to know was the first oracle's attitude towards Chu Luiyue. What kind of place is the illusionary god Sea? In the past 10,000 years, 90% of the cultivators who trespassed there died and were buried at the bottom of the sea. As for the remaining 10%, even if they were lucky enough to escape, they would inevitably be severely punished. Even if they didn't die, they would be half dead. However, when it comes to her, it's different. He sneered coldly with a hint of mockery. Nanjin Shu felt a little uncomfortable when he heard this voice. But at this time, he didn't have time to think about this. His focus was the same as the sixth divine envoys. Sixth divine envoy, do you also find this matter strange? I originally thought that the first god's emissary wouldn't let Shangguanyu off the hook so easily, but who would have thought that he wouldn't be punished at all? What do you think the first oracle is thinking? The thoughts of the first divine envoy are not something that we can guess. This, Nanjin Shu frowned. He could hear that the sixth divine emissary seemed to be very concerned about this matter, but perhaps because he was afraid, he did not continue to speak. All right, you can go back. Nanjin Shu was at a loss when the sixth divine emissary suddenly asked him to leave. Was he letting him go just like that? Could it be that the sixth emissary had asked him to come here just to ask about this? But, the sixth divine envoy, get out. That voice carried an unquestionable pressure. Nanjin Shu's heart skipped a beat. He didn't dare to ask any more questions and quickly retreated. Mu Hongyu left with the map that Chu Luiyue had drawn. She still needed to go back and take a closer look at the situation below the illusionary god ocean. Also, she had to break through to the Mahayana realm as soon as possible. After Mu Hongyu left, Chu Luiyue asked Xiao Zhou to leave as well. She sat alone in her room to think. Now, there were a lot of things that she needed to solve. She hadn't finished her star path yet. This was the fastest and most suitable way for her to enter the illusionary god palace openly. Su Li had been in the illusionary god palace for a while and would carefully investigate the situation from time to time. But after all, she was under the watchful eyes of the god's emissaries. There were many things that Su Li did not dare to go overboard with, so the information that she could find was limited. Until now, there were still no clues as to the whereabouts of Dugu Mabao and Lan Xiao. Chu Luiyue could basically conclude that the two of them were trapped in an extremely secretive location in the illusionary god palace. It would be impossible to rely on Su Li alone to find them. She still had to go in. At the same time, The third Guqin score was also very important to her. She had to think of a way to get information from Nanjinshu. If she guessed correctly, the third Guqin score was still in the Divine Ruins world. And the two gods' emissaries, Jiao Long and Shi Yan, who had left earlier, were probably looking for the last Guqin score. Unfortunately, the two of them had already disappeared without a trace, leaving no clues behind. And Diwu Zhangze, who was trapped in the illusionary god ocean, what kind of person was the first god's emissary? You. A low and pleasant voice sounded. Chu Luiyue turned around and saw Rong Xiu walking in. He came in front of Chu Luiyue. Seeing her frown, he reached out and smoothed her brows. What are you thinking about? Why are you so tired? Chu Luiyue held his hand and rubbed her face against the back of his hand. It's still those. Rong Xiu smiled and hugged her. He leaned over and kissed her hair. Tell me about it. Miss Shangguan. I have something to do. Zhao, who had just walked to the door, was originally smiling. But when he saw the cold and noble figure hugging Chu Luiyue in the room, he was shocked and stunned. Why was she here? Chapter 23:17. The most important thing was that he seemed to have come at the wrong time. When the two people in the room heard the voice, they both looked outside the door. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. This is... Ming's heart trembled violently. He originally wanted to run away, but it was obviously too late now. If he wanted to go in, he really couldn't move his legs. Chu Luiyue raised the corners of his lips slightly. Lord Ming, why are you here? Please come in. He didn't dare to disobey Madam's orders. Silently holding his breath, he walked stiffly and braced himself to enter the house. Chu Luiyue stood up. Rong Xiu, let me introduce you. This is Lord Ming of Zhenbao Pavilion. He usually treats me very well and has helped me a lot before. Rong Xiu's thin scarlet lips curled into a smile. I see. Lord Ming, I've heard a lot about you. Ming Shu's legs went soft. He barely restrained his urge to kneel down and bow. He forced a smile. You flatter me. I've heard a lot about you too. Pa. Rong Xiu laughed. Since Lord Ming has taken good care of you, as her husband, I naturally have to thank you properly. Ming Shu repeatedly said that he didn't dare. But it's just a small matter. It's not worth mentioning. At this moment, he was extremely grateful to the second master. If it weren't for that person's reminder, he wouldn't know when he had offended Madam. How could he stand in front of this person and talk to him like this? Chu Luiyue raised his hand. Lord Ming, please sit down. You can talk slowly. How could Ming Shu dare to sit down? He coughed, waved his hand, and said, No need, no need. I'm here today because I have something to tell you. I'll leave after that. Chu Luiyue looked at Ming Shu and felt that he was a little strange today. He seemed very nervous. It must be a big matter for you to personally solve the case. Please speak. Ming Shu tried his best to make himself look as calm and composed as he usually did. He said, It's like this. I came here this time to ask you if you've been in contact with Mu Yafeng recently. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Mu Yafeng? No, what? You frowned. Actually, it's nothing much. It's just that Mu Yafeng has continued to walk the star path since yesterday. Furthermore, in a short span of one day, he had broken through 3 great Grandmaster Xian formations. I thought it was a little strange, so I thought I'd come over to ask you. Lord Ji thinks that I revealed the contents of the mythical flame diagram to her? Chu Luiyue immediately understood. Please don't misunderstand. Zhao hurriedly explained, I just feel that this matter is really strange, so I wanted to ask you for confirmation. After all, those Xian formations were extremely difficult to decipher. Previously, she didn't make any progress for such a long time, but now she's suddenly improved by leaps and bounds. Chu Luiyue nodded in understanding. What Lord Ji said makes sense. Previously, Senior Xiao Ran had also said that he had spent several years on those great Grandmaster-level profound formations before he had barely comprehended them. Originally, according to his speculation, Mu Yafeng should also need a long time to decipher this Xian formation. Previously, she was busy with the illusory god Si, so she didn't know that Mu Yafeng had made a move again. Now that she heard it, she also felt that it was very strange. The mythical flame diagram is a treasure of Treasure Pavilion. When I agreed to help copy it, I already knew the rules. I would never easily reveal it to outsiders. I didn't even reveal it to my subordinates. Lord Mingshu, you can rest assured about this. Yu hurriedly said, "Of course I believe in your character. I have no intention of doubting you." Heavens! He was really just curious, so he came over to ask. Who knew that he would bump into this person? Wasn't this suspecting that there was something wrong with Madam? Even if he was given 10 more guts, he wouldn't dare to do this. If he had known that this person was here, he would never have stepped into this courtyard. Chu Luiyue smiled. I know that Lord Yu has no ill intentions. Actually, it's not just you. I also feel that it's a little strange. Mu Yafeng's talent is not bad, but with her own strength, it is indeed impossible for her to decipher 3 Grandmaster Xian formations in such a short time. Chu Luiyue's words were tactful. In fact, it should be said that it was absolutely impossible. If she had this ability, she wouldn't have dragged her feet on the Star Passage for so many years. In the eyes of many people in the illusory God Palace, Mu Yafeng was already a rare genius. But in Chu Luiyue's opinion, but it was fine. Ming Shu heaved a sigh of relief and said, not only that. She hasn't finished yet. She's still on the Star Passage. When I came here just now, I passed by and took a few glances. There was a bit of an irresistible force. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. You mean, she plans to directly finish the Star Passage and enter the illusory God Palace? Ming Shu paused. It's hard to say, but if her performance is still like this, then it might really work. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. In fact, she didn't care much about Mu Yafeng. But this matter was really strange. Otherwise, she wouldn't have made a special trip. I'm here today mainly to talk about this matter. It's up to you how you think. Ming Shu said. Chu Luiyue nodded. Thank you for reminding me, Lord Yu. Ming Shu waved his hand. Then, if there's nothing else, I'll leave first. There are still some things to deal with in the Treasure Pavilion. Hearing this, Chu Luiyue didn't ask him to stay. I'll send you off. No need, no need. I took the liberty to disturb the 2 of you. I'll leave now. How dare he really let the 2 of them send him off? As he spoke, he walked outside. Take care, Lord Yu. Rong Xiu said lightly. Ming Shu staggered, but a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. He steadied himself and looked up. Suddenly, the corner of his eyes twitched. Yen Qing stood with his sword in his arms. There was no expression on his handsome and cold face. He just looked at him quietly. Yu quickly swallowed the rest of his words, nodded slightly, and hurried away. For some reason, his footsteps became faster. Almost in the blink of an eye, he had already opened the gate of the courtyard and slipped away. In such a hurry. Chu Luiyue looked at Yu's back and muttered in a low voice. The person he just mentioned, is she the one who asked you for the mythical flame diagram? Rong Xiu tilted his head and asked. Chu Luiyue nodded thoughtfully. That's her. However, based on my understanding of her, she shouldn't be able to do such a thing. Even if she went back to cultivate in seclusion for a while, she shouldn't have advanced by leaps and bounds. The 7th Oracle values her very much. I don't know if she went to consult him. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly and said lightly. The 7th Oracle really doesn't have good taste. Chapter 23:18. His tone was light and indifferent, extremely natural. Chu Luiyue glanced at him, wrinkled her nose, and smiled. There aren't many people who dare to say that the 7th Divine Emissary has no foresight. The Divine Emissaries had a very high status in the illusory God Palace. Many people would be extra careful when talking about them, let alone such a straightforward judgment. Rong Xiu bent his finger and lightly scratched her nose. Am I wrong? He's a Xian master himself. It's impossible that he can't see my Yu's talent. Chu Luiyue shrugged and sighed. Isn't it because you don't have a bloodline totem? From the first day she came here, she deeply understood how much contempt and ridicule she would face without a bloodline totem. Rong Xiu's eyes narrowed slightly as his finger lightly brushed across her forehead. Chu Luiyue's heart moved. She leaned closer and whispered, Rong Xiu, the infinite divine dial, can only test people with bloodline power? Rong Xiu looked at her. After a moment he said, Of course. Bang. A stream of light flew up and quickly bloomed into an extremely brilliant Xian formation. Mu Yafeng looked up with unconcealable excitement in her eyes. The fourth one. This was already the fourth Xian formation she had cracked in a row on the Star Road this time. And it only took her less than 2 days. Not far behind her, many people were watching. Seeing that she had successfully cracked another Xian formation, the crowd instantly became restless. What's wrong with Mu Yafeng? Why did she suddenly become so powerful? The further she goes, the more complicated the Xian formation is. I remember that she was trapped in a Xian formation for a long time and couldn't crack it in the end, so she had no choice but to give up. How long has it been? She's back again and her progress is so smooth. Her talent has always been outstanding. Maybe she suddenly had an epiphany. If this continues, she can really comprehend all the Xian formations and officially enter the illusory god palace, right? I thought it would be Shangguan Yu. Ha! What a joke! Shangguan Yu is very powerful, but she doesn't have a bloodline totem. It won't be her turn, right? That's true, but other than that, she's really powerful. Didn't you guys hear that she went to the illusory god ocean and came back safe and sound? She even beat Nanjinshu. If she didn't have the confidence, would she dare to do that? Mu Yafeng was in a good mood when she heard the envy and admiration of the people in front of her. However, the name that appeared later caused her eyes to turn cold. It was just because he had some talent that he dared to act so recklessly. I heard she was because she made demands of herself is the second divine emissary of God to the illusory god. She is really arrogant. The second oracle could tolerate her once or twice, but it was hard to say what would happen if she did it too many times. Mu Yafeng shook her head, dispelled the messy thoughts in her mind, and continued forward. This time, no matter what, she had to complete the star path and enter the illusory god palace. In the courtyard, Rong Xiu and Chu Luiwei sat facing each other. A translucent chessboard floated between them. On it, the two chess pieces were fighting fiercely. Chu Luiwei stared at the chessboard and rubbed her chin. Ever since she read the mythical flame diagram and officially broke through to the great Grandmaster realm, her Xian formation cultivation had improved greatly. But after fighting with Rong Xiu, she felt a deep sense of defeat. Now, no matter where she went, there was no way to reverse the situation. She was at the mercy of others. Master, thither. Go there. An anxious voice came from behind her. Chu Luiwei looked back helplessly. Little Hachi, how many times have I told you not to speak while watching the game? Can't you just paint your nails in peace? Little Hachi pursed her red lips and waved her hand. How can I be at ease when Master can't win? Look, it's all messed up. Chu Luiwei. Are you complaining that your master is not good enough? Little Hachi narrowed her eyes and quickly smiled. Of course not. I'm doing this for your own good. Look, you've played with His Highness for so many years, but you've only won a few times. Chu Luiwei, I remember this clearly. I really don't need you to remind me. She raised her chin. You want me to go there? Little Hachi's eyes lit up. Sit. Then watch carefully. Sush. Chu Luiwei flicked her finger, and a piece condensed from divine power flew out and landed on the spot Little Hachi pointed out. Rong Xiu's eyes were calm as he placed a piece. It was as if a sword had slashed down and completely sealed Chu Luiwei's last path. Chu Luiwei spread her hands. Did you see it clearly? If we do as you say, it will only make your master die faster. Little Hachi shrank her neck guiltily. Ahem, master, I haven't been learning for long. Of course, I can't compare with you and His Highness. I promise I won't say anything next time. Chu Luiwei said. You said the same thing last time and the time before that. Little Hachi pursed her lips and made a sewing gesture. Chu Luiwei gently knocked her forehead. You won't remember it anyway. She was used to it. Little Hachi's eyes were filled with tears. She really wanted to help her master win. At this moment, Shijing walked in from outside. Chu Luiwei was a little surprised. Shijing, where did you go? She didn't see Shijing after returning from the illusionary God Sea. Roy bowed to them one by one before explaining. Master, I went to the Thunder Pool. Chu Liwei was slightly stunned. Isn't the Thunder Pool sealed? Now, there shouldn't be anyone in the illusionary God Palace going there. Shijing chuckled. But I just went to the shore to take a look. I didn't do anything else. Chu Liwei laughed. All the Tianlei in the Thunder Pool have been frozen. What's there to see? Shijing said. Nothing. Master, there are a lot of Tianlei in the Thunder Pool. The second oracle and the others only sealed the upper layer, but the lower ones are still fine. Chu Liwei frowned slightly. Oh, how do you know? This matter was extremely confidential and hidden. Ordinary people definitely wouldn't be able to guess. Shijing paused. Just guessed? The Tianlei power below is still wandering around. If you stand close and take a closer look, you can see it. Chu Liwei looked at him meaningfully. Shijing. Sigh. You. Chu Liwei was about to speak when Sun Yi suddenly pushed open the door and came out. Master. Seeing that his expression was different from before, Chu Liwei knew that something must have happened, so she immediately asked, What's wrong? Sun Yi came to her. Qi Han sent a message saying that they met Jiao Long and Shi Yan in the god-slaying tomb. What? Chu Liwei was shocked and stood up. Because she was too shocked, she didn't notice that Sun Yi didn't call the two oracles but directly called them by their names. Chapter 23:19. God-slaying tomb? What are they doing there? Chu Liwei had thought of many places, but she had never thought of the god-slaying tomb. A thought suddenly flashed through her mind. Could it be that the last Guqin score was in the god-slaying tomb? But that couldn't be right. Back then, she had finally gotten the second Guqin score from Senior Ah Jing in the god-slaying tomb. If the third one was there, how could he not know? Her brows were tightly knitted together. Rong Xiu asked, Did you just get the news? Sun Yi nodded. He could contact everyone in the 13U. After getting the news, he immediately came to Chu Liwei. Of course, he knew how important the last Guqin score was to Chu Liwei. Chu Liwei pondered for a moment and suddenly thought of a question. Why is Qi Han in the god-slaying tomb? You just said them. Who else is with him? Sun Yi said, and Old Six. It seems that they went there to help Old Six break through. But they didn't expect to run into those two. Chu Liwei froze. Qi Han and the others haven't seen Jiao Long and Old Six. How would they know who they are? Sun Yi explained. They haven't seen those two, but they know that you're in the Illusion God Palace and know a thing or two about this place. Besides, those two are above the God level. Even if they don't know who they are, once they use their strength, it's hard to imagine. That's true. This made sense. Rong Xiu's eyes fell on Chu Liwei. What's your plan, he? Chu Liwei was silent for a long time before she finally took a deep breath. To the god-slaying tomb. To go to the god-slaying tomb, they had to leave the heavenly gate. Not to mention Jin Yunlai, even Chu Liwei felt that this trip was too troublesome. But they still had to go. For the sake of convenience, this time, Chu Liwei and Rong Xiu went together, and no one else was brought. When the two of them arrived at the gate of heaven, there was no one there. In fact, most of the time, this place was empty. Who would come to the heavenly gates to play? Wasn't that just looking for trouble for himself? Last time, it was because of Nan Jinshu's incident that caused such a huge commotion. However, now that Nan Jinshu had returned to the palace of the illusory god and was staying there obediently, there was no need to mention the others. Looking at the barrier in front of him, Chu Liwei didn't hesitate. He raised his hand and pressed it. Buzz, a ripple spread out. Chu Liwei turned around and looked at Rong Xiu. The seventh divine envoy is in charge of the gate of heaven. If there is any movement here, he will immediately rush over. You didn't see him last time, so you can meet him this time. Rong Xiu smiled. Sure. The palace of the illusory god. Jin Yunlai sensed the familiar aura at the gate of heaven. His forehead twitched violently, and with a crack, he broke the brush in his hand. It's her again. This Chu Liwei, is there no end to it? Last time, He said he was going to invite the weapon refining saint. Last time, he said he was going to see Nanjinshu. What is it this time? Jin Yunlai didn't want to pay attention to him, but the gate of heaven was constantly moving. Chu Luiwei was determined to go out. After a while, Jin Yunlai finally couldn't help but stand up. However, before he could walk out, a voice suddenly came from afar. Jin Yunlai. Jin Yunlai was shocked when he heard the voice. The first divine envoy? Then, an illusory figure gradually appeared in front of him. However, the figure was shrouded in a layer of faint light, making it difficult to see his facial features. He could only barely make out a silhouette. Even so, Jin Yunlai recognized at a glance that it was indeed the first divine envoy. He took a quick glance and immediately looked away. He bowed his head and said respectfully, "Greetings, first divine envoy. May I know why the first divine envoy is here today?" Due to nervousness, Jin Yunlai's body was a little stiff. Ever since the first divine envoy went into seclusion, he had never stepped out of the courtyard. Although he did not appear with his true body and was only a strand of his aura, this was the first time he had done so. "Don't you know why I'm here?" The voice was low and indifferent, but it carried an invisible pressure. Jin Yunlai's chest tightened. He frowned and quickly searched his mind. Recently, he didn't seem to have done anything. Why did the first divine envoy sound like he was scolding him? Please enlighten me, first divine envoy. Buzz. There was movement at the gate of heaven again. Jin Yunlai subconsciously turned his head to look. The first divine envoy had already made his move. A red stream of light flew out quickly and went straight to the gate of heaven. Jin Yunlai was shocked. The first divine envoy made his move personally? The Xian formations on the star passage can only be comprehended by oneself. Otherwise, it will be regarded as cheating. Then Mu Yafeng, what's going on? Do you want me to continue asking? Jin Yunlai's heart sank. The crimson streak of light flashed through the air at high speed. It arrived at the gate of heaven in the blink of an eye. Chu Luiwei heard the movement and looked up. He felt a little strange. This is the first divine envoy's aura? Noticing this, a look of shock flashed across her eyes. Then, the red stream of light landed on the barrier. The enchantment quietly opened. Chu Luiwei was stunned. After waiting for a while, Jin Yunlai didn't arrive. Instead, the first divine envoy made his move? What does he mean by this? Chu Luiwei couldn't figure it out for a moment. Warning? Reprimand? Rong Xiu smiled faintly. Maybe the seventh divine envoy is busy. Digression, very good. Someone in the comments section guessed part of the truth. 6 o'clock. Chapter 23:20. When Jin Yunlai did not show up, Chu Luiwei did not pay much attention to it. However, when the first god emissary suddenly made a move, she was very surprised. Could it be that he finally decided to come out of seclusion? But something like opening the gate of heaven, it seemed that no matter what, it was not his turn to do it. Rong Xiu held her hand. There's no time to lose. Chu Luiwei retracted her gaze and gently nodded. The two figures quickly disappeared outside the gate of heaven. After a while, the barrier reassembled and was very calm. Chu Luiwei's departure did not attract the attention of the people in the illusory god palace. On one hand, many people's attention was on Mu Yafeng. On the other hand, the movement in the gate of heaven was too small. From the beginning to the end, only a short period of time had passed. Only the divine envoys who were guarding the various locations raised their heads in astonishment when they sensed this fluctuation. The first god emissary made a move. More importantly, he seemed to be at Jin Yunlai's residence. In an instant, several god emissaries immediately moved out and headed towards Jin Yunlai's direction. The first god emissary had been in seclusion for several years. Now that he finally made a move, they naturally had to go and check it out. Illusory God Palace. There was dead silence in the huge room. Jin Yunlai stood there with her fists clenched. Most of her strength seemed to have been sucked out of her body. Even opening her mouth to speak was difficult. Her face was pale and her lips trembled slightly. She felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave. Every word of the first god emissary's questioning was heavy and cold. After a long time, she finally found her voice. I just gave her a little reminder. A little reminder? The first god emissary asked. Jin Yunlai closed her eyes and finally said dejectedly, yes. I intentionally helped her. The gate of heaven will only open for a year. If she is unable to comprehend all the Xian formations on the star path before the deadline and enter the illusory god palace to ascend to the heavens, then she will have to wait for another 10,000 years. A few months have already passed and she is still trapped in those Xian formations. I just feel that her talent is not bad. It is a pity to wait so long. Who in the illusory god palace didn't wait like this? The first oracle let out a rare laugh as if he had heard a joke. Xiao Ran has already been stuck in the last few profound formations for 30,000 years, but I don't see you helping him. Jin Yunlai could hear the dissatisfaction in the first oracle's words. Xiao Ran was Xiao Ran after all, and Mu Yafeng was different. First divine envoy, ever since I took control of the star path, no one has successfully walked through the star path and entered the illusory shrine. This period of time was truly too long. Many mystic cultivators had already lost their confidence, and fewer people were even trying. If this continues, that's because they don't have the qualifications to enter the illusory god palace. Back then, didn't you successfully complete the star path and even become the 7th divine envoy? Jin Yunlai looked troubled. But back then, it was because Jin Yunlai felt a chill in her heart when she sensed a cold gaze on her. She immediately swallowed the rest of her words. After a long while, he said, "This is Yunlai's fault. Yunlai will accept any punishment given by the first oracle. But there are some things that I have to say. Mu Yafeng is the most talented mystic cultivator in the illusory god palace in the past 10,000 years. If even she can't do it, then there's no need to talk about the others. If I have to choose to help someone ascend to the heavens and become a god, I will still choose her. You also understand the situation of the profound formations on the star path. The further you go, the more difficult it is. If you don't have enough talent and strength, even if someone gives you pointers, it's still useless. I admit that I helped Mu Yafeng, but she was able to succeed because of her own reasons. Besides, strictly speaking, I did give her some pointers, which may not even be as detailed as the annotations on the mythical flame diagram. If Shengguan Yu can read the mythical flame diagram, why can't Mu Yafeng? In the beginning, he actually didn't have this idea. On one hand, it was because he thought highly of Mu Yafeng and always felt that these problems weren't difficult for her. On the other hand, he didn't have such plans before. But as time passed, the development of the situation gradually deviated from his expectations. On Mu Yafeng's side, she was unable to crack the profound formation and was trapped in one place for a long time without any intention of continuing. On the other hand, Chu Luiyue continuously advanced with the help of the mythical flame diagram and successfully stepped into the area of the Grandmaster's profound formation. If this continued, Chu Luiyue might really surpass Mu Yafeng. That wasn't the result that Jin Yunlai wanted to see. Because she didn't have a bloodline totem, Jin Yunlai was biased against Chu Luiyue from the beginning and always felt that she would leave the illusory god palace soon. Who knew that not only did she not leave, but she also caused a lot of trouble and became the focus of the illusory god palace. If she really took the lead, not only would Mu Yafeng be unhappy, but Jin Yunlai would also feel like she was slapped in the face. Even if Chu Luiyue couldn't ascend to the heavens and become a god, as long as she performed better than Mu Yafeng, it was inevitable that everyone would talk about her. And Jin Yunlai, who was in charge of the star path, would naturally be implicated. What would happen in the end? Everyone would see that Mu Yafeng, who he had always thought highly of, was actually not that outstanding at all. Instead, it was Chu Luiyue, who had been despised and ridiculed from the beginning, who easily crushed her in all aspects. Thinking of this scene, Jin Yunlai felt that it was hard to accept. So when Mu Yafeng came to beg him, he thought about it again and agreed. And her performance did not disappoint him. He thought that everything would go smoothly, but who knew that this matter would alarm the first divine emissary? The first divine emissary listened quietly for a long time before asking, "Are you done?" Jin Yunlai let out a long breath. "I'm done. It seems that you still think that you did nothing wrong." The first divine emissary's voice was faint with a trace of indifference. "Jin Yunlai, I always thought that you were very smart, but now it seems that you are ridiculously stupid. Until now, can't you see that Zhen Bao Pavilion took the initiative to give the mythical flame diagram to Shangguanyu?" Jin Yunlai was shocked and suddenly looked up. "What? Zhen Bao Pavilion giving it to Shangguanyu and you helping Mu Yafeng don't seem to be the same nature, right?" Chapter 23-21. Jin Yunlai stood there in a daze for a long time. His mind was in a mess, and his whole body was in a mess. Zhen Bao Pavilion took the initiative to give it to her? Didn't this mean that? He suddenly thought of something and sucked in a breath of cold air. A look of horror flashed across his eyes. First Oracle, only now did he realize what he had done wrong. Now, he had no time to think about why Zhen Bao Pavilion did this. He only knew that this time, if he was not careful, he would lose himself. "I'll go and take back the Xian formation diagrams that I gave to Mu Yafeng." The first Oracle suddenly asked. "You gave her the method to break all the Xian formations?" Jin Yunlai swallowed his saliva with difficulty, but his throat was still tight. In the eyes of the first Oracle, this reaction naturally meant that he admitted it. "That's right. Since you've made up your mind to help, of course, you have to help until the end." The first Oracle's voice was emotionless. This made Jin Yunlai even more flustered. "Just as well. Open your eyes wide and take a good look. See if Mu Yafeng can ascend to the heavens and become a god with your help." Jin Yunlai felt suffocated and uncomfortable. He wanted to defend himself, but he couldn't say a word. Knock knock. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. "First Oracle, are you there?" This was Shu Jing's voice. She did not go to Herb Mountain today, so when she heard the commotion, she hurried over. She was the first to arrive. Jin Yunlai was about to speak when he saw the phantom in front of him suddenly disappear. He wanted to ask her to stay, but she had already disappeared. It was just the aura of the first Oracle. He could come and go as he pleased. He took a deep breath and rubbed his face hard. After being the seventh Oracle for so many years, he had always been cautious. This time, he was impulsive and went easy on Mu Yafeng. He did not expect that he would be caught red-handed by the first Oracle. Although the first Oracle did not give him any substantial punishment, this made him even more nervous. He really could not understand what that person was thinking. Was he planning to come out of seclusion? If that was the case, there was nothing wrong with it. But the crux of the matter was, with so many things happening in the illusory god palace recently, why did that person target him? Helping Mu Yafeng cheat was neither a big deal nor a small matter. No matter what, it couldn't be more important than the Lightning Pond and Fengming Mountain, right? First Oracle? Shu Jing waited for a while, but he still didn't hear any movement inside, so he shouted again. Creak. The door was opened. Jin Yunlai appeared behind the door. When Shu Jing saw him, he subconsciously looked inside. The first Oracle has already left. Jin Yunlai said coldly. That person really came? Shu Jing looked shocked. He's willing to come out of seclusion? That's not right. Why is he looking for you the moment he comes out? Jin Yunlai didn't want to talk too much with her, so she just said perfunctorily, the first divine emissary did not come personally. He only sent a wisp of his aura to ask me some questions. Shu Jing's expression softened a little, but he still felt quite surprised. What's the matter that actually alarmed the first Oracle? Jin Yunlai glanced at her. You came here to ask about this? Then you can leave. After saying that, he closed the door again. Bang. Shu Jing didn't expect his actions to be so swift and straightforward. She was so shocked that she took half a step back. When she came back to her senses, she was immediately angry. Didn't she come to ask because she was too surprised that the first Oracle had come out of seclusion? What kind of attitude was this? If it weren't for the fact that Jin Yunlai's status was slightly higher than hers, she would definitely not let it go so easily. Shu Jing tidied her clothes and turned to leave. After taking a few steps, She suddenly thought of something and turned back to look at the tightly shut door. Just now, Jin Yunlai's expression was particularly ugly. Did something happen between him and the first oracle? She thought for a moment and raised her voice. Seventh oracle, I heard that Mu Yafeng has already cracked 6 great Grandmaster Xian formations in a row. Aren't you going to take a look? Bang! Jin Yunlai suddenly smashed something. Xu Jing's heart skipped a beat. What was wrong with him? Wasn't Mu Yafeng someone he particularly valued? Now that she had an outstanding performance, why was he still so angry? Xu Jing had a bad feeling. She gritted her teeth and finally turned to leave. After that, a few more oracles came to find out what was going on, but they were all sent away by Jin Yunlai with a few words. When Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu left the illusory god palace and crossed the blue and black sea, she deliberately slowed down. Unfortunately, nothing out of the ordinary happened. After that, the two quickly rushed to the god-slaying mound. Because it wasn't their first time there, and because their strength had improved greatly, it only took them a short time to get there. At noon the next day, the two successfully arrived again. After passing through the forest, they officially entered the god-slaying mound. Looking from afar, it was vast and barren, bleak and cold. It was no different from before. It was just that the inexplicable coldness and pressure seemed to be stronger than before. There was a faint smell of blood in the air. Chu Luiwei frowned slightly. It had been a long time since they had been here, and the god-slaying mound seemed to have some subtle changes. They should already be inside. Rong Xiu looked into the distance and narrowed his eyes. Chu Luiwei nodded. Then, the two walked forward hand in hand. At this time, deep in the god-slaying mound, Qi Han was holding a long sword and staring at the two in front of him vigilantly. Behind him sat a young man covered in blood. It was Lu Feng. Jiulong laughed. You want to enter here with just the two of you? Chapter 23-22. In front of them was a large area of broken tombstones. A desolate and sorrowful aura slowly spread out. This was the tomb of the honored god. Qi Han and Lu Feng had been in the god-slaying mound for some time. They had spent a lot of time and effort to get here. They did not expect Jiulong and Shiyen to arrive at this time. As soon as they arrived, they ordered everyone to leave without hesitation. Most of the cultivators in the god-slaying mound had been forced to leave. Of course, not everyone was willing to do so. However, these two were too powerful. Even honored gods could not last more than 3 moves against them. Everyone had no choice but to obey. Jiulong and Shiyen had entered from the edge of the god-slaying mound, so they were the last to arrive here. They met Qi Han and Lu Feng, who were waiting outside the tomb. The aura of the tomb of the honored god had changed slightly with the passage of time. To ensure their safety, the two decided to wait here until the aura was at its weakest before going in. When Jiulong and Shiyen arrived, Qi Han and Lu Feng had already waited here for 3 days. As expected, they were also chased away. But they did not agree. After a short stalemate, Jiulong and Lu Feng attacked. After a few rounds, Lu Feng was injured and defeated. Qi Han held his sword in front of Lu Feng to guard against Jiulong's next move. Of course, Jiulong didn't take his actions seriously at all. They were just 2 exalted gods. What was there to care about? Jiulong looked down at the 2 of them. My patience is limited. I can't be bothered to continue arguing with you. I'll count to 3. If you don't leave by then, don't blame me for being merciless. Qi Han said coldly. The god-slaying mound is not anyone's private territory. Every cultivator in the world comes here. You want everyone to leave? That's too unreasonable. 1. Jiulong raised one finger. Obviously, he did not care about Qi Han and Lu Feng. He could not be bothered to continue arguing with them. After all, he had already given them the warning he needed. If they insisted on not listening, there was nothing he could do. Lu Feng coughed and slowly wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He twitched his lips without a smile. Qi Han, there's no need to say so much to them. If they were reasonable, they would not do such a thing. Shiyen glanced at the 2 of them and said slowly, that's right. Reason? Don't you know that in this world, strength is the only thing that matters? 2. Jiao Long raised her eyebrows. These two people were really not afraid of death. Unfortunately, perseverance without strength was ignorant stubbornness. Not only was it meaningless, it would even bring him a lot of trouble. The first messenger only said that the two of them were to come and find the last piece of music, but he did not say where it was. The god-slaying tomb was huge. Even if the two of them worked together, it would still take a lot of effort to find it. Because they were worried that someone would find the music score before them, the first thing they did when they arrived was to drive everyone out. Better to be safe than sorry. Although this would be troublesome, it would avoid some risks. Overall, it was worth it. Most of the people he had met before were quite obedient, or rather, sensible. After seeing that Jiao Long and Shi Yan's strength far exceeded theirs, they all gave up and retreated. Only these two were stubborn. 3. Jiao Long shouted the last count, shook his head, and raised his hand. It's your honor to die in my hands. He did not want to dirty his hands with the blood of the exalted gods. Unfortunately, these two were not smart enough. Vigorous divine power quickly gathered in Jiao Long's palm and transformed into a long sword. The long sword was bright and sharp, and it was covered with a thin layer of frost. Under the sunlight, it shone with a cold light. Then he raised the sword and slashed down. The sword fell silently, but wherever it passed, space was quickly cut open and then collapsed. Large swathes of black spatial cracks appeared, and violent energy surged out from them. Qi Han gripped his sword even tighter. Just as he was about to attack, he realized that he could not move at all. The powerful aura suddenly descended, and he could not retaliate at all. Jiao Long's sword fell from the sky and was about to kill Qi Han and Lu Feng. A bloody wound suddenly appeared between Qi Han's eyebrows. That was an extremely sharp sword energy, and it easily broke through his defense. Jiao Long's eyes were indifferent. Die. That sword flew toward Qi Han at an even faster speed. However, right at this moment, a sharp sound of air being torn apart suddenly came from afar. Swoosh. Then, a bright golden and greenish-black sword light flew from the sky, piercing through the clouds and wind. Clang, swish. That sword light and Jiao Long's long sword collided, and then quickly flew up and slashed across. In an instant, sparks flew everywhere. Jiao Long's sword was sent flying just like that. Seeing this, Jiao Long was shocked and immediately raised his hand to call back his sword. The sword landed in his palm and was still trembling violently. It could be seen how powerful that blow was. He frowned and looked over. That was an extremely sharp long sword. Half golden, half greenish-black, neatly and perfectly blended together, and the glow was bright and heavy. This was, just as Jiao Long and Shi Yan were shocked, Qi Han and Lu Feng had already sensed the extremely familiar aura on that sword. The two of them quickly looked at each other and saw the excitement in each other's eyes. Jiao Long turned his head and looked in the direction where the sword came from. He shouted in a deep voice, "Who is it?" A clear and pleasant voice drifted over with the wind. Ninth Divine Envoy, if you want to kill my people, you should at least ask for my permission first, right? Jiao Long was stunned at first, then he realized that this voice was very familiar. A name suddenly appeared in his mind. Shangguan Yu? Just as he finished speaking, a woman in a red dress appeared in a flash. Her figure was slim and graceful, and her beauty was unparalleled. Her black hair flew in the wind, and the hem of her dress danced. There was a faint smile on her face, and her starry eyes were slightly curved like the moon, as if they were filled with starlight. Jiao Long's face darkened. "It's really you." Qi Han and Lu Feng could no longer suppress their emotions and shouted in unison. "Master!" Chu Luiwei came in front of the duo and sized them up. She only relaxed when she saw that their injuries weren't particularly serious. She smiled and said, "Don't worry. Fortunately, we're not too late." Jiao Long frowned and stared at the few people in front of him. "The two of them are your subordinates." Chu Luiwei turned around and tucked her hair behind her ear. She raised her finger and the Star Spectre sword returned to her hand. She smiled. Chapter 23:23. Jiao Long looked at the woman in front of him in shock. He had only used 30% of his strength in that attack, but it wasn't something an ordinary cultivator could withstand. And yet, Chu Luiyue had blocked it so easily. He had heard this name a few times recently. After all, she had caused quite a commotion in the Illusion God Palace. But it wasn't until today that Jiao Long realized that her strength was indeed far beyond that of an ordinary god. "You came out of the Heaven Gate?" Jiao Long asked. Chu Luiyue smiled and nodded. "It's not the first time I've come out. Ninth Divine Envoy, why are you so surprised?" Jiao Long choked. He just felt that it was too ridiculous. Most of the cultivators in the Illusion God Palace would never step out of the Heaven Gate, let alone come to the world of Divine Ruins. And those who came from the world of Divine Ruins were proud to be able to enter the Illusion God Palace. They didn't want to leave. There were very few people like Chu Luiyue who kept going in and out of the house. Her frequency was even higher than that of the Divine Envoys. Wasn't the 7th Divine Envoy in charge of guarding the Heaven Gate? Why did they let her come out again and again? More importantly, she didn't have a bloodline totem. Wasn't that even more ridiculous? Jiao Long stared at her vigilantly. "What are you doing here?" Even if she left the Illusion God Palace, there were many places she could go. Why did she choose the God-slaying tomb? It was related to the last zither score, so Jiao Long couldn't help but feel suspicious. Chu Luiyue blinked. "My two subordinates are here. What's so strange about me coming here? But the two divine envoys, why did you suddenly leave the Illusion God Palace and come here and drive everyone else away? What are you doing?" Jiao Long's expression was cold. "That's not something you have the right to ask." Chu Luiyue said, "Oh. It seems that the two divine envoys don't want to reveal. Then forget it." As she spoke, she raised her head towards Qi Han and Lu Feng behind her. "Let's go." She was about to go to the tombs. Jiao Long never thought that Chu Luiyue would actually walk in without a second word. He didn't even put them in his eyes. Chu Luiyue stopped in his tracks and turned his head to ask, "What's wrong? Is there anything else?" Jiao Long gritted her teeth. "It seems like you've turned a deaf ear to what we've said before?" Chu Luiyue asked. "Words? What words?" Jiao Long felt stifled in his chest. Qi Han explained. "Master, they have already chased away all the cultivators here. If you hadn't come in time, I'm afraid we would have already." Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows. "Oh, about that?" She was wondering why she hadn't seen anyone along the way. It turned out that Jiao Long and Shi Yan had chased them away. In that case, it was even more obvious what they wanted to do. Chu Luiyue tilted his head and looked at Jiao Long and Shi Yan. "That's really unfortunate. I've come this time because I have something important to do, so I won't be able to leave for the time being. I hope the two divine envoys will forgive me." Although she said so, her expression and tone were extremely natural. There wasn't the slightest hint of apology in them. Clearly, she wasn't asking for help. She was just informing them of her choice and decision. She was going to stay here. Shi Yan frowned and said coldly, "Shengguan Yu, you've done so many outrageous things in the Illusion God Palace. For Dumpling's sake, the divine envoys didn't pursue the matter. But that doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. If you don't listen to our advice, don't blame us for being impolite." Chu Luiyue's lips curved into a faint smile. "Forgive me for being blunt, but I don't think the divine envoys have done anything extra for me. Why do you look like you've given me a lot of things?" Shi Yan felt even more annoyed. In the Illusion God Palace, the divine envoys were revered. No matter what they said or did, their subordinates would do as they were told. Very few would object, and even fewer would dare to talk back to them. But now, Chu Luiyue had done all of this, and she didn't seem afraid at all. Who gave her the confidence? "Shengguan Yu, are you sure you want to continue being so impudent?" Jiao Long raised his sword and pointed it at her. "No matter how powerful your eminence is, she's still your eminence." If he used his full strength, Chu Luiyue wouldn't be able to retaliate at all. Chu Luiyue blinked and smiled in the face of the cold sword light. "Divine envoys, if I'm not wrong, the two of you are also here for that last zither score, right? Since everyone has the same goal, Why don't we work together and find it first? We can talk about the rest later. These words caused Jiulong and Xian's expressions to change. This was something that the first divine messenger had specifically instructed the two of them. How did she know about it? Seeing the duo's reaction, Chu Luiyue also found it interesting. She glanced at the two of them, then slowly asked, "You've come here to find the zither scores. The two of you have already come here to look for the zither score. Don't tell me that you still don't know. The two zither scores from before have already recognized me as their master?" "What did you say?" Jiulong and Xian both exclaimed in shock. Chu Luiyue shrugged. It seemed that they really didn't know. Since the first divine envoy gave you this task, why didn't he tell you about it? Not many people knew that she was the master of the zither scores, but Nanjing Shu was one of them. He had chosen to tell the first divine envoy the location of the last score, so there was no reason for him not to tell her. Besides, someone like the first divine envoy should know this like the back of his hand. Otherwise, how could he be qualified to be called the first divine envoy and be in charge of the entire illusion god palace? But the strange thing was, these two didn't know. Jiulong was about to attack. Chu Luiyue calmly raised her hand. "Wait, ninth divine envoy, I've already said that the two zither scores are with me, and they already belong to me. If you kill me now, you won't get a single one." Once she died, the two zither scores would be scattered and hidden away again, and they would never be found again. Unless there was something wrong with their heads, Jiulong and Xian would never touch her. This was also why Chu Luiyue dared to be so frank. Since she couldn't hide it, she might as well be frank. "You dare threaten us?" Jiulong gritted her teeth. Chu Luiyue sighed helplessly. "I've already made it so obvious, but you two only realized it now?" She had always been a straightforward person. If she wanted to threaten someone, she would do it openly and openly. The first two zither scores were with her. If they had the ability, they would have to fight for it. She wasn't afraid of death, but she didn't know if the illusion god palace would be afraid of getting nothing in the end. Chapter 23-24. Jiulong and Xian never expected that Chu Luiyue would do such a thing. She directly admitted that the two zither scores were with her and used them as leverage to threaten them so that they wouldn't dare to kill her. She was so direct that she didn't even give them any time to react. The most hateful thing was that after thinking about it carefully, they realized that Chu Luiyue wasn't so arrogant for no reason. After knowing this, even though they hated her to the core, they didn't dare to do anything to her. "Since you're looking for the zither scores and I'm also looking for one, isn't it just right for us to work together?" Chu Luiyue asked with a smile. Jiulong was fuming with anger. "What do you mean by just right? Shengguan Yu, do you really think we're fools?" The zither scores had already recognized her as the master, so even if they found the remaining one, it would most likely end up in her hands. In this aspect, she had an absolute natural advantage. Even if they worked together and found the zither scores, it would just be a wedding dress for her. Right now, they couldn't wait to guard against her, so why would they work together with her? Chu Luiyue looked regretful and spread her hands. "It seems that the two of you aren't willing. Since that's the case, then let's mind our own business and rely on our own abilities. How about it? This zither score belongs to whoever finds it first." Jiulong and Xian looked at each other. Of course, they didn't want to agree to Chu Luiyue's suggestion. She was the master of the zither scores, so she had an advantage over them. But if they didn't agree, looking at her posture, it seemed like she was going to continue to cause trouble. And they couldn't do anything to her. After a long while, Xian gave Jiulong a look, then looked at Chu Luiyue. "Since you insist, it's not that we can't agree. But we also have a condition. Divine Envoy, please speak. Whether or not we can find the zither scores will depend on our own abilities. However, the person who brings the zither scores back to the illusion god palace will be the real winner. At that time, no matter what the result is, the other side can't continue to fight for it." Chu Luiyue's red lips curved slightly. "I knew these two people wouldn't be easy to convince. So this was what they were planning. One had to know that there was a considerable distance between here and the illusory god palace. Who could predict what would happen in the middle? Even if she found it first, They could snatch it from her halfway and forcefully take it for themselves. In this way, he would be able to achieve his goal. Chu Luiyue was a god, while Qi Han and Lu Feng, who stood behind him, were both high gods. Jiao Long and Shi Yan, on the other hand, were both at a level higher than her eminence. Wasn't this clearly bullying? Once they made a move, Chu Luiyue's side would not be able to compete with them even if they tried their best. This was clearly a robbery. However, after Chu Luiyue thought about it seriously for a while, he nodded happily and agreed. Sure. Chu Luiyue's reply was too sudden. Even Jiao Long and the other two were momentarily stunned. However, one thing needs to be clear. Does returning to the illusory God Palace refer to passing through the gate of heaven or something else? If you insist that it only counts after entering the illusory God Palace, then wouldn't I have lost from the start? Chu Luiyue shrugged. Naturally, it counts after passing through the gate of heaven. Shi Yan added. Although he didn't know why Chu Luiyue agreed, this condition was clearly beneficial to them. It would be a waste not to use it. It would be best if the two of them could directly find the last zither score. If Chu Luiyue was one step ahead of them, they could just snatch it back. As long as they didn't harm her life, everything else was still under their control. Jiao Long's mood finally calmed down. Since we've discussed it then, rumble. A loud sound suddenly came from afar. Jiao Long and Shi Yan immediately turned to look. This sound came from the depths of the tomb. Someone had already entered. The two looked at each other. Jiao Long immediately realized something and looked at Chu Luiyue angrily. You secretly brought someone here? Chu Luiyue smiled, and her eyes curved into crescents. I didn't say that I came here alone. Jiao Long was so angry that her teeth were itching. She had said so much just to stall for time. Shi Yan frowned. Forget it, now is not the time to argue with her. Let's go in and see what's going on. This commotion came so suddenly that it was definitely not something an ordinary cultivator could do. Something must have happened in the tombs of her eminence. Perhaps it has something to do with the last zither score. Jiao Long glared at Chu Luiyue. Shengguanyu, it's too early for you to be happy. The one who has the last laugh is the winner. Chu Luiyue couldn't be bothered with the two of them. She turned to Qi Han and Lu Feng. Let's go. As soon as she finished speaking, she tapped the ground with the tip of her foot, and her slender figure quickly disappeared from the spot. She went straight into the depths of the tomb. Qi Han and Lu Feng followed closely behind her. Fortunately, the two of them weren't seriously injured. Moreover, Chu Luiyue and Jiao Long had been fighting for a while, so they had rested enough and quickly followed. Jiao Long cursed under her breath and followed Shi Yan. Jiao Long and Shi Yan's cultivation level was higher than Chu Luiyue's after all. In just a few breaths' time, they had overtaken them. The two of them didn't stop and went straight in the direction of the voice. After about 15 minutes, they saw a figure in the distance. It was a young man. At this moment, his back was facing them. His clothes were whiter than snow, and he was tall and straight. He had one hand behind his back. The space in front of him was already beginning to distort and collapse, and it was constantly devouring the energy around him. Even though it was only a back view, that cold and noble aura was still not concealed in the slightest. Jiao Long frowned. Is this the person who came with Shengguanyu? Why does it look like something is wrong? He couldn't tell what was wrong, but there was an inexplicable sense of uneasiness in his heart. However, he quickly threw this feeling to the back of his mind. Who are you? How dare you team up with Shengguanyu and deceive the two of us? Jiao Long asked in a low voice. Hearing her voice, the man turned around. His handsome and devilish face seemed to be covered with a thin layer of frost. His phoenix eyes were deep and unparalleled. Jiao Long, Shi Yan, you're getting bolder. Digression, I want to eat barbecue. I'm going to be a fan. 6:00 p.m. Chapter 23-25. This question instantly caused Jiao Long and Shi Yan to be shocked on the spot. Emperor? The two of them were shocked. Their previous arrogance immediately disappeared and was replaced by deep respect. Why are you here? Jiao Long's face turned pale. What did he say to the emperor just now? No wonder he felt that something was wrong when he saw this figure. He actually didn't recognize it. Actually, Jiulong couldn't be blamed. After so many years, the number of times he had seen the emperor could be counted on one hand. On one hand, the emperor didn't show up most of the time. On the other hand, with his and Shi Yan's seniority, they were usually quite far away from each other. They couldn't be said to be familiar with each other. Moreover, they didn't expect that the emperor would appear here. Rong Xiu looked up slightly. 3 figures could be vaguely seen from afar. They were Chu Luiwei and the other 2. Their strength was not as strong as Jiulong and Shi Yan. In addition, Qi Han and Lu Feng were only in the high god realm and were injured, so their speed was even more limited. As a result, the distance between the 2 sides was so large in a short period of time. However, this made it convenient for Rong Xiu. This short period of time was enough for him to solve the problem of the 2. Thinking of this, Rong Xiu retracted his gaze and looked at the 2 again. Feeling that indifferent and cold gaze on them, Jiulong and Shi Yan felt a sense of pressure and their bodies tensed up. "Didn't you already guess why I am here?" he said indifferently. The 2 of them were stunned. After a while, they suddenly came to their senses and were shocked. Wait, what does the emperor mean? Did he really come with Chu Luiwei? But Chu Luiwei's background, when did he have contact with the emperor? Furthermore, it would appear that the relationship between them was not ordinary at all. Otherwise, Chu Luiwei wouldn't have used such a tone when he mentioned the emperor. Shi Yan suddenly thought of something and gasped. "Emperor, that Shangguan Yu is one of your men?" He was guessing that Chu Luiwei was Rong Xiu's subordinate and nothing else. However, Rong Xiu was too lazy to correct him. He only raised his eyebrows slightly. There was nothing wrong with that. Ben was his. His reaction, in the eyes of the other 2, was obviously a tacit agreement. For a moment, the 2 of them did not know how to react. Why didn't Chu Luiwei mention such an important matter before? If she had revealed even the slightest bit, she definitely wouldn't have received that kind of treatment in the illusory god palace. Jiulong and Shi Yan couldn't figure it out. The only thing they were clear on was that they had offended Chu Luiwei earlier, and this undoubtedly meant that they had offended the Celestial Emperor as well. "Celestial Emperor, we have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai, which is why we offended you. Please forgive us." Jiulong came back to his senses and quickly begged for mercy. Other than begging for mercy, he couldn't think of anything else he could do now. Previously, he had rushed over excitedly, intending to find the last zither score before Chu Luiwei. Even if he couldn't find it, it wasn't bad to get rid of the person who conspired with her first. Who knew that he would bump into this person? Wasn't this courting death? Shi Yan saw the situation and immediately followed suit, his heart filled with uneasiness. Although they had only seen the Celestial Emperor a few times, they were very clear about the Celestial Emperor's temperament. It was definitely not to be provoked. The mistake that they had made today was enough for them to suffer a lot. Rong Xiu didn't say anything. The surroundings fell into a dead silence, as if even the air had frozen at this moment. The 2 of them held their breaths, as if their hearts were about to jump out of their throats. Finally, Rong Xiu spoke. "Go to the illusory god Sea and receive your punishment. Without Ai's permission, you are not allowed to leave." Hearing this, Jiulong and Shi Yan were stunned. Celestial Emperor means, now? Rong Xiu's eyes moved slightly, and his thin scarlet lips raised into an extremely cold arc. "If you can continue to stay here, it will be considered as your ability." The 2 of them trembled at the same time. This meant that if they didn't leave immediately, the Celestial Emperor would personally take action. Even if the 2 of them had the guts, they wouldn't dare to take such a risk. Wasn't this taking the initiative to throw themselves into a knife's mouth? But, Celestial Emperor, it's not that the 2 of us deliberately disobeyed your orders, but this time, we are here on the orders of the first divine envoy to find the last zither score. If we can't complete the mission, I'm afraid that when we return, we won't be able to explain it to the first divine envoy. Jiulong braced himself and spoke with difficulty. If they had any other choice, they wouldn't choose to go against the Celestial Emperor. But in this situation, they really had no choice. After all, The divine envoys were from the illusory god palace. Since the first divine envoy had ordered them, they didn't dare to disobey. Although the celestial emperor had a noble status, under most circumstances, he wouldn't interfere in the matters of the illusory god palace. And the zither score was also an item of the illusory god palace. Logically speaking, this matter shouldn't have much to do with the celestial emperor. Why would he come here personally? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. What? I's orders can't even compare to the words of the first divine envoy. We don't dare. Jiao Long and Xian's souls almost flew out of their bodies as they hurriedly denied. Not to mention them, even the master of the illusory god palace had to respectfully greet the celestial emperor when he saw him. How could they dare to say that? After weighing the pros and cons, the two of them struggled for a while before finally nodding with difficulty. We obey the celestial emperor's orders. But the last zither score, Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes. The zither score came from the illusory god palace, so it should return in the end. Hearing this, Jiao Long and Xian only thought that he agreed to return the last zither score to the illusory god palace after finding it. No matter what, they would be able to answer to the first divine envoy when they returned. Then, the two of us will take our leave. After saying that, seeing that Rong Xiu's expression was normal, the two of them bowed respectfully and then hurriedly turned and left. Their speed was even faster than when they came. They were afraid that if they were a step late, they would lose their lives here. After a while, the two figures quickly disappeared into the distance. At this moment, Chu Luiyue and the other two finally arrived. Seeing that only Rong Xiu was here, Chu Luiyue was stunned. Where are the two divine envoys? Chapter 23-26. Rong Xiu turned around. Who? Chu Luiyue said, the 9th and 10th divine messengers. The two of them just came here. Didn't you see them? Rong Xiu shook his head. I've been here the whole time. I didn't see anyone coming. Chu Luiyue frowned. How could she not see them? Although the two divine messengers had put some distance between her and 7 Childu Wind, she was sure that they were coming this way. She looked left and right. The surroundings were barren and desolate. There were no signs of anyone coming here. Suddenly, she focused her gaze and looked at the collapsing void not far behind Rong Xiu. This is... Rong Xiu followed her gaze and explained. The loud noise just now came from here. The last time we came here, something similar happened, but it was different. Chu Luiyue nodded slightly. She had noticed this as well. The last time, she and Rong Xiu fell into a space that suddenly collapsed, and they brought the rocks back. This time, the energy and pressure here were much stronger than in the tombs of the high gods. Although the void was constantly swallowing energy, twisting and collapsing, it was not completely overturned yet. From this, one could see how powerful the power of space here was. At a glance, a transparent vortex had formed in the void. It kept spinning and expanding. The surrounding energy of heaven and earth kept surging into it, gradually turning it into a black hole. It could not be seen or touched. Only the vast pressure was getting heavier and heavier, indicating the danger within. It was still rising. A faintly discernible summoning force came from the vortex. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly and walked forward. Qi Han and Lu Feng called out worriedly. Chu Luiyue raised her hand. Don't worry. I know what to do. With that, she continued to walk forward. At this moment, a piece of gravel the size of a palm suddenly rolled over from the side. It only stopped when it touched the tip of her foot. Chu Luiyue looked down. Obviously, this stone came from one of the tombstones. And it was the tomb of the high god. She bent down and picked up the stone. Suddenly, she heard a faint buzzing sound in front of her that could not be ignored. Buzz, she looked up in surprise, only to see that the vortex not far in front of her had suddenly stopped spinning. But this situation only lasted for a moment. The next moment, everything returned to normal. It didn't seem any different from before. However, Chu Luiyue's eyes widened in shock. Because there seemed to be an invisible connection between her and the vortex. This feeling was very strange. From this moment on, she could vaguely feel the changes in energy of the vortex. She was stunned for a moment, then suddenly she looked at the stone in her hand. It was just a shattered, weathered, and ordinary-looking rock. There were traces of erosion on it. If it was on the ground, no one would take a second look at it. However, this was a tombstone that belonged to a high god. At this moment, the void to her right twisted and collapsed, then quickly formed a vortex. Another stone rolled to her feet. Chu Luiyue sucked in a breath of cold air. An absurd and daring idea surfaced in her mind. "It can't be," she muttered softly. Then, she bent down and picked up the second stone. Almost at the same time, the second vortex stopped spinning. Chu Luiyue's hands slowly clenched. Then, the vortex spun again, and it established that invisible connection with Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue was shocked. As expected. The stones here were similar to the ones she had obtained in the high god's tombstones, but in fact, they were very different. Each of them actually controlled a space. It might be an exaggeration to say that they controlled it, but it was basically the same. The surrounding energy was constantly surging toward the two vortexes, and the two stones in Chu Luiyue's hands seemed to be faintly strengthening. Although it was subtle, it could not be mistaken. Clang. Suddenly, the sound of a zither came from Chu Luiyue's dantian. The sound of the zither was bleak and cold, and it spread far and wide in this vast wilderness. Chu Luiyue frowned subconsciously. She did not do anything just now, so why did the sound of the zither suddenly appear? Suddenly, a cry of surprise came from the wind. "The void over there is also starting to collapse." And there. Chu Luiyue followed his gaze. Not far behind them, 3 more vortexes quickly appeared. The vast space seemed to be divided into countless small areas, and they all started to collapse. In just a few minutes, Chu Luiyue and the others were already surrounded by several void vortexes. A few stones rolled over and stopped at Chu Luiyue's feet. Her heart raced, and the blood in her body seemed to be boiling. Her guess seemed to be correct. These stones, these tombstones of her eminence, these heroic souls that had been buried for tens of thousands of years, seemed to be awakening. Her eminence was naturally different from a high god. A high god's combat strength was in the god domain, but her eminence had completely divided this world and controlled the endless power of space. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Void vortexes appeared around them one after another. More and more stones came to Chu Luiyue's side, as if they were responding to her summons. Clang, clang. Chu Luiyue's glabella was boiling hot. Chapter 23-27. She touched the area between her eyebrows. It was as if there was a burning flame burning there. Her heart was beating rapidly, and the blood in her body was surging. This was her totem? Chu Luiyue had known about the existence of this thing for a long time, but it had only appeared a few times when she was in a life-or-death situation. Hence, she had not been able to pay much attention to it. But now, this totem had suddenly appeared again. It was so clear. The surrounding energy of heaven and earth started to gather towards her quickly. Her aura also started to rise rapidly. Buzz buzz. Chu Luiyue looked up. Above the heavens, the void was continuously distorting and collapsing. Vortexes were constantly appearing. Large pieces of rocks had already piled up beside her feet. An unparalleled amount of energy exploded, creating an extremely terrifying pressure that made it hard for people to breathe. Beside her, Lu Feng clutched her chest and sat down. She coughed a few times and wiped away the blood at the corner of her mouth. Then, she placed her hands on her knees and started to channel the surrounding energy into her body. Under such a powerful pressure, the best way to deal with it was to cultivate. Seeing this, Chi Han's expression became serious. He also placed his sword in front of him and started to cultivate. At this moment, endless energy was surging towards them from all directions. Most of it entered the collapsed void, which indirectly strengthened the power of the rocks beside Chu Luiyue's feet. The remaining small portion dissipated and was swallowed by Lu Feng and Chi Han. Although the energy that the two of them occupied was only a small portion compared to the energy that was surging into the void, it was definitely an extremely vast amount for an exalted god. A faint blue glow overflowed from Lu Feng's body and quickly enveloped him. This was his godly territory. After the violent energy entered this godly territory, it was refined and became even purer. Without a doubt, this greatly increased Lu Feng's cultivation speed. Qi Han, who was beside her, made the same choice almost at the same time. A faint silver glow silently spread out and enveloped Qi Han's body. Rong Xiu's gaze turned slightly and paused on the two of them for a moment. His eyes were deep, yet calm and indifferent. In the next moment, he looked away. In fact, if there were other cultivators present, they would definitely be shocked to see Lu Feng and Qi Han's situation. After all, the two of them were only high gods. Logically speaking, their god realms should not be able to resist the terrifying might of the venerable god around them. It was even to the extent that the deity domain could not be used under such circumstances. However, from the beginning to the end, the movements of these two people were extremely smooth and natural, as if they were not hindered in the slightest. If Chu Luiwei turned around to take a look, she might have sensed that something was wrong. However, all her energy was focused on the collapsing void and the gathering stones. How could she care about anything else? One after another. As more and more stones approached her, the invisible connection between her and the void vortexes around her became closer and closer. At the same time, a sense of desolation and sorrow welled up in his heart. Chu Luiwei was never a sentimental person. However, as she stood here, as time slowly passed and everything around her kept changing, her state of mind seemed to be moving along uncontrollably. A wind blew, carrying the coarse gravel of the desolate wilderness. When it brushed past her face, it brought a slight stinging pain. The smell of blood in the air seemed to have thickened. The solemn and bleak sound of the zither rang out from her body and spread far and wide. There seemed to be an image that appeared in her mind, but it was not very clear. Chu Luiwei raised her hand almost instinctively. Her eyes focused and seemed to have sunk into nothingness. At this moment, there seemed to be countless stars in the depths of her obsidian-like eyes. Then, her slender and white fingertips gently plucked. Clang. There were no strings under her hands, so she used the countless intersecting spaces as support to play the zither. Clang clang. Shattered tombstones stood in great numbers on the wilderness. There seemed to be a zither sound in the depths that resonated with her from afar. The palace of the illusory god. Jiao Long and Shi Yan returned as fast as they could. After stepping into the illusory god palace, they did not care about anything else and hurried to the residence of the first divine envoy. Just as they arrived outside the courtyard and stood still, the door of the courtyard opened. Seeing this scene, Jiao Long and Shi Yan looked at each other and saw the worry and nervousness in each other's eyes. The first divine envoy obviously knew something. This made them timid and for a moment, they did not dare to take a step forward. Come in and talk. A low and indifferent voice came from inside. The two did not dare to refuse and walked in nervously. Just like last time, they stopped when they were 5 steps away from the door. After respectfully cupping their fists, Jiao Long spoke after some deliberation. First divine envoy, this time, the two of us did not do well and did not succeed in bringing back the zither score. Please punish us. Reason? The voice was calm and collected, without the slightest hint of surprise. This, Jiao Long wiped the sweat from her forehead. However, Shi Yan could not help but explain. First divine envoy, this time we failed to return because the emperor also went to the god-slaying tomb. Also, Shanghai Yu went with him. Maybe because Shanghai Yu was the owner of the first 2 zither scores, the emperor intended to let her do it. Although we don't know why the emperor suddenly intervened, we did not dare to disobey the emperor's order, so we came back. However, the emperor promised to send the zither score to the illusory god palace after this matter is over. Jiao Long gritted her teeth and added, in addition, the two of us have been ordered to the illusory god sea to receive punishment because we offended the emperor unintentionally. Without the emperor's order, we are not allowed to go out. In other words, after explaining to the first divine envoy, the two of them had to go to the illusory god sea. After the two of them finished speaking, the room was silent for a long time. This strange silence caused the two of them to be somewhat at a loss. Just now, they did not say anything wrong, did they? No matter what, they had explained the matter clearly. If one thought about it, one would understand that this matter was not their fault. Not to mention them, even the first divine envoy did not dare to disobey the emperor's order. Moreover, the emperor had already punished them. What else could be considered enough? Jiao Long and Shi Yan waited for a long time. First divine envoy? Finally, they got a response. I already know about this matter. You can leave now. You should receive your punishment, but this matter cannot be spread. The two of them were stunned. You mean, the emperor went to the god-slaying tomb? The voice paused. Everything and everyone related to the zither score must be kept secret. Chapter 23-28. This was the highest secret of the illusion god palace, so it was normal for the first divine envoy to ask them to keep it a secret. Without any hesitation, the two of them immediately agreed. Yes. If the other divine envoys ask, just say that you didn't manage to find the score and offended the emperor, so you were sent to the illusion god ocean. There's no need to mention anything else. Jiao Long paused. He could guess what the first divine envoy meant, but he wasn't sure. After a moment of hesitation, he finally asked. First divine envoy, then? Shengguan Yu is the emperor's woman. Don't you understand the emperor's attitude? The first divine envoy interrupted him with a cold and indifferent voice. Jiao Long was shocked and hurriedly said, Jiao Long understands. Shi Yan understands. That woman had been in the illusion god palace for so long, but she hadn't revealed anything. The emperor's intentions were clear. The only thing that wasn't right was probably the extra attention and care that Zhenbao Pavilion had given her. But that matter didn't arouse too many people's suspicions. After all, Chu Luiyue was a mystic master and had great talent and strength. Even if she didn't have any background, it was normal for Precious Treasure Pavilion to be willing to support her. Jiao Long and Shi Yan had heard about this before, but they didn't take it to heart. But now that they thought about it, they realized that there was a reason for everything. It was just that if this reason were to be revealed, who knew how many jaws would drop from shock? The two even secretly rejoiced that they hadn't interacted much with Chu Luiyue. Other than the dispute over the score in the god-slaying tomb, they hadn't offended her much. Judging from the emperor's attitude, it was clear that he valued her greatly. It wouldn't be good to provoke her. You may leave. Hearing this, the two heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly left. After they left, the gate of the courtyard was tightly shut. In the courtyard, little Hachi was lazily resting on a chair, holding a scarlet pill in her hand. She narrowed her eyes and looked at it through the light. Jian Fengqi sat next to her with his hands on his knees. A rare hint of nervousness appeared in his charming peach blossom eyes. Did you refine this yesterday? Little Hachi asked. Jian Fengqi nodded. A total of 6 pills. They're all here. There was a jade bottle beside little Hachi. The one in her hand was the first one she had poured out. The veins on it were clear, and the medicinal fragrance was rich. This was a top-notch Grand Physician-level pill. Then, with a light pinch of her fingernails, the pill instantly turned into ashes. Little Hachi. Jian Fengqi's eyes widened instantly. Why did you destroy my pill? Little Hachi blinked. Didn't you ask me to help you refine the pills? This is my answer. There is no need to keep this pill. Go back and continue to work hard. Jian Fengqi's eyes twitched. It took an entire day. You managed to refine a pill of this standard in just one day? As a grand physician, aren't you a little too weak? Little Hachi's words successfully blocked Jian Fengqi's remaining words. Then, little Hachi picked up the jade bottle beside her. With a squeeze of her palm, the jade bottle, along with the pills inside, was instantly turned into ashes. Jian Fengqi suddenly stood up, his handsome features distorted for a moment. With just these, you'll never be able to break through to Grand Physician level in this lifetime. Little Hachi clapped her hands, took out a snow-white handkerchief, and carefully wiped her hands clean. Jian Fengqi clutched his chest and took a step back. He pointed a trembling finger at little Hachi, but he couldn't say anything. He was angry. He thought that he had suffered enough during this period of time, But he underestimated little Hachi's fighting ability. Last time, he stole a medical book from little Hachi. Although he didn't say it out loud, he was still very grateful to little Hachi. So after he finished refining this time, he specially came to ask little Hachi for help. But what awaited him was an absolutely merciless attack from all sides. Jian Fengqi regretted it for a moment. When he first got the medical book, why did he think that little Hachi was a good person? He was really blind, really blind. Little 8 was finally satisfied when he saw him being angered to this extent. Actually, she wasn't so sharp-tongued in the first place, and she wasn't deliberately targeting Jian Fengqi. It was just that she had suffered too much from Big Brother recently, and needed to find someone to calm down. Seeing Jian Fengqi suffer, little Hachi immediately felt much better. That's right. She was still very outstanding. In fact, Big Brother was still the pervert. Yes, that was it. Thinking of this, little Hachi narrowed her beautiful eyes and said with a smile, "Seeing that you've worked hard to refine these pills, I'll say one more thing. There are 2 medicinal herbs in here, you've used the wrong ones. Of course I know what's wrong with these pills." Jian Fengqi snorted. Little Hachi was stunned and sat up. Really? Jian Fengqi pursed his lips. Isn't it just raging wintergrass and riverwood? Originally, we should use wind thousand seeds and devil's snare to replace them. Little Hachi raised her eyebrows and looked him up and down. Oh, I couldn't tell. You really know? Jian Fengqi didn't say anything. He was still distressed over the bottle of pills that little Hachi had just crushed. However, little 8 didn't mind and asked again. Since you know, why don't you change it? If these 2 medicinal herbs are used well, the level of this pill can be raised from senior doctor to senior doctor. Jian Fengqi did have some skills. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to compete with Chu Luiyue for so many years and still be just a hair's breadth away. This in itself was enough to show that he actually had extraordinary talent. Many times, a tyrannical opponent could often stimulate a person's potential to the greatest extent. Jian Fengqi was like this. Although he had been defeated repeatedly over the years, he had unknowingly left countless people far behind. Hearing little Hachi's question, Jian Fengqi sighed. You think I don't want to do this? But Herb Mountain doesn't have those 2 medicinal herbs. How is that possible? Little Hachi's face was full of astonishment. Although these 2 medicinal herbs were precious, they couldn't be considered top-grade rare items. Moreover, what didn't Herb Mountain have? I've asked. They did have them before, but the last batch was harvested decades ago. Although there are new ones, they're not old enough. These 2 medicinal herbs required at least 100 years of age. He had no choice but to give up. Little Hachi blinked and then stood up. Impossible. Herb Mountain has always been guarded by the 8th Oracle. How could she make such a low-level mistake? No matter what kind of heavenly treasure, when harvesting it, must not be completely seized. Instead, the foundation must be left behind. Little Hachi's heart suddenly burned with a ball of fire. Is she crazy? Chapter 23-29. The corner of Jian Fengqi's eyes twitched as he held his forehead helplessly. This person's temper was still as bad as before. In the entire illusory god palace, there were probably only a few people who dared to scold a divine envoy like this. He waved his hand and motioned for little Hachi to sit down and restrain herself. Little Hachi, lower your voice. Are you afraid that others can't hear you? Although this was their own courtyard, it couldn't stop the walls from having ears. If someone heard it and reported it to the 8th divine envoy, then little Hachi's brows furrowed. Did I say something wrong? Herb Mountain is such a large territory, and there are many kinds of herbs. How could someone have picked them all? And more than one kind. She's a divine envoy, isn't she too ridiculous? Shu Jing had always considered himself as the manager of Herb Mountain, and now it turned out like this? Seeing her huge reaction, Jian Fengqi's heart instantly felt touched. Little Hachi, I didn't expect you to be so concerned about my alchemy. Little Hachi glanced at him. Brother, don't misunderstand. I'm just worried about those herbs. Jian Fengqi. Pretend I didn't say anything. Little Hachi crossed her arms and paced back and forth in the courtyard in annoyance. She really couldn't figure out what Xu Jing was doing? The key was that in the past few years, she had imposed various restrictions on entering and leaving Herb Mountain. With just this, how could things turn out like this? Little Hachi struggled for a while and finally couldn't help but walk out. Jian Fengqi hurriedly asked, "Hey, where are you going?" Little Hachi was angry. "To Herb Mountain. I want to see if she deliberately hid the herbs or if she really let someone use them all." Jian Fengqi was stunned. Strange, when did Little Hachi become so angry? He wasn't angry himself, so why was she so angry? Seeing that Little Hachi was really going out, he hurriedly stood up to stop her. "Little Hachi, I think we should just forget about it. Is she the 8th oracle? If he really let her go there so excitedly, she would definitely cause trouble." Little Hachi raised her eyebrows. "What? You don't dare to go?" Jian Fengqi was speechless. Was this a question of whether he dared or not? At this moment, Shijing also walked out of the house and headed outside. Seeing the two of them standing at the door, he greeted them. "Yo, Little Hachi, are you going to Herb Mountain again?" Little Hachi nodded. "That's right. How did fourth brother know?" Yoshii suddenly paused and staggered. He quickly supported himself on the door and coughed. "Ahem, I heard you guys talking about this just now. Does fourth brother also support me going?" Little Hachi pouted and asked pitifully, "Fourth brother, you have no idea what Xu Jing has done to Herb Mountain." Shijingo glared at him and immediately patted his chest. "Go. In this illusion god palace, where can't Little Hachi go?" "Don't worry, with fourth brother here, no one will bully you. When fourth brother is done, I'll go find you." "Fourth brother is still going to the lightning pool?" "That's right." Shijing nodded. "I think they don't plan on unsealing it yet. I really don't know how long they'll drag it out." His tone was filled with dissatisfaction. He had been going there almost every day recently, and Little Hachi was already used to it. She nodded in agreement. "It's a bit too much. Fourth brother, you go first. I can handle my own matters." "Don't worry." Jian Fengqi, who was standing at the side, was confused. What were they talking about? Why did it sound like those oracles really couldn't do a good job and they were very dissatisfied with it? Chu Luiwei was used to being arrogant. Why were the 13 U-guards learning from him? They didn't even have a bloodline totem, but each of them was more arrogant than the other? Lightning Pool, Herb Mountain. Why did it sound like it was her territory? Mitsui responded and gave her a thumbs up, praising her. "Thank you for your help. Little Hachi, you're so beautiful today." 81st smiled, then asked, "What's the matter? You weren't beautiful yesterday?" Mitsui immediately said with great sincerity, "Little Hachi is beautiful every day. The second most beautiful woman in the world. The number one beauty was their master." This was the tacit agreement of the 13 U-guards. Hearing this, Little 8 was indeed satisfied, and only then did he wave his little hand. "Then fourth brother, goodbye." Only then did Shijing leave. After taking a few steps, Shijing lightly slapped his own mouth. "Who told you to be so talkative? Who told you to be so talkative?" Actually, when he was in the room, he had been thinking about the lightning pool. He didn't hear a single word of what Little Hachi and Jian Fengqi said outside. When he was about to leave, he coincidentally bumped into them and a sentence came out just like that. Luckily, he managed to cover it up. Shijing took a deep breath, then quickened his pace and walked forward. With Shijing's support, Little Hachi immediately became more confident and went straight to Herb Mountain. Jian Fengqi saw that he couldn't persuade her, so he could only follow her. Little Hachi looked back at him and teased. "Why, aren't you worried that you'll cause a lot of trouble if you go with me?" Jian Fengqi said seriously. "No matter what, this matter started because of me. I can't just sit back and do nothing." Little Hachi was interested and asked. "Then if I fight with Xu Jing," Jian Fengqi said without hesitation. "I'll cheer for you." Little Hachi, she knew that she couldn't rely on this brother of hers. The two of them were very fast. Herb Mountain was the same as usual. People came and went, and it was very lively. When they saw Little Hachi coming over, many burning gazes fell on her. At the same time, some of them glanced at Jian Fengqi with hostility. Jian Fengqi was silent for a moment. Little Hachi, I'm a little regretful. Can I go back now? Little Hachi walked forward without looking back. What are you afraid of? Let them look. It's not like you'll lose a piece of meat. Jian Fengqi. You won't, but I might. It wasn't that he hadn't been looked at by so many people at the same time, but they were usually women. It was the first time that so many men were staring at him at the same time. Young Master Jian was really panicking. Little Hachi laughed. I see that many girls are looking at you too. Jian Fengqi's looks were top-notch, and he was suave and elegant. It was normal for girls to like him. Swish! Jian Fengqi pushed open his fan and covered half of his face as he softly said, I'm sorry. Shoo, don't talk nonsense. It's not good if others hear you. Little Hachi understood. I'm afraid that little Hongyu will hear me. But she's been cultivating in seclusion in her room recently. Jian Fengqi's eyebrows twitched. How do you know that she won't suddenly appear here? This was what she was best at, all right. He was busy defending himself and didn't deny the first half of the sentence. Little Hachi pursed her lips and smiled meaningfully. Forget it. Let's go see if there are any more of those two herbs. After saying that, she ran in a certain direction. Jian Fengqi said, Wait, it's not there. He had been here before and was clearly in the opposite direction. Little Hachi blinked. It's here. Digression, 13 U-guards, gradually recovering lost territory 600 p.m. Chapter 23:30. Jian Fengqi pointed in another direction. Wind thousand seeds and devil's snare are usually associated with each other. They grow in damp and cold places. I've been to this herb mountain a few times. I'm sure I'm not mistaken. Little Hachi said, I didn't say you were mistaken. But didn't you say that there's none over there? Let's go somewhere else. Who knows? Jian Fengqi said helplessly, I've already asked around the entire herb mountain. There's only one place that has it. It's over there. It's not found anywhere else. Little Hachi suddenly became stubborn. But how will we know if we don't go? Jian Fengqi couldn't argue with her, so he had to say, all right then. Let's go over there and take a look. Little Hachi nodded and headed in a certain direction without hesitation. Jian Fengqi frowned slightly. Looking at Little Hachi's back, a strange feeling welled up in his heart. Why did he feel that Little Hachi didn't just pick a random direction? Instead, she had already made up her mind to go there? This thought flashed through Jian Fengqi's mind, but he quickly suppressed it. He moved his feet and followed her. The herb mountain stretched for hundreds of miles. The area was vast, and the mountain range was continuous. There were all kinds of heavenly materials and earthly treasures. It was easy to get lost in this place if one wasn't careful. But Little Hachi seemed to be very familiar with this place. She turned left and right without stopping. After walking for a while, Jian Fengqi finally couldn't help but ask, Little Hachi, how many times have you been here before? Why are you so familiar with this place? Little Hachi thought for a moment and said, Not many times. But the terrain here is simple. I can remember it with a glance. What's so strange about it? Jian Fengqi, looking at Little Hachi's relaxed expression, for a moment, he doubted his brain. Was it not enough? That couldn't be right. He was a celestial physician. With so many complicated prescriptions, he could basically memorize them after reading them a few times. His memory could definitely be considered top-notch. However, after coming to Herb Mountain several times, he often felt a little confused. What was going on with Little Hachi? After thinking for a while, Jian Fengqi felt that there was only one possibility. Little Hachi's talent was indeed a little better than his. No matter what, she was now a supreme doctor. It was not surprising that she was better than him in this aspect. Thinking of this, Jian Fengqi felt much better. We're here. It was right in front. Little Hachi suddenly said. Jian Fengqi followed her line of sight and saw that behind a steep and tall mountain, there was actually a rather short and ordinary hill. The mountain was verdant and lush, and there were many medicinal herbs growing there. However, when Jian Fengqi took a closer look, he did not see Feng Qianzi and Mandala. This place doesn't have it, right? He said with some uncertainty. Little Hachi did not say anything. In a flash, she arrived at the foot of the hill. A small stream flowed by. The water was so clear that the bottom could be seen. On both sides of the stream, there were clusters of lush green bellflowers that were half the height of a person. Little Hachi's body was light as she jumped over a few stones in the stream. After arriving at the other side, she stretched out her hand and brushed aside a cluster of bellflowers. Look, isn't this it? Hearing this, Jian Fengqi was stunned and hurried over. He went over to take a look. Indeed, there were clusters of feng qianzi growing under the bellflowers. These feng qianzi had no leaves. On the rhizome, there were round and round seeds in a picturesque disorder. When the wind blew, this heavy cluster of seeds swayed with the wind. A few of the seeds were blown off and scattered in the stream, flowing downstream. Because these feng qianzi were a light green, they were hidden very well among the bellflowers. Therefore, Jian Fengqi did not see them at first. At the rhizome of the feng qianzi, there were thin purple vines wrapped around it. It was mandala. They really do have them? Jian Fengqi was really shocked. More importantly, these feng qianzi and mandala seemed to be at least 500 years old. However, he had asked many people before, and they all said that Herb Mountain did not have any more feng qianzi and mandala of this age. What are you waiting for? Little Hachi raised her chin, indicating that he could take the things away. Jian Fengqi came back to his senses and took a few clusters. Looking at the herbs in his hand, Jian Fengqi could not help but look at Little Hachi again with a strange expression. Little Hachi, this place is so secluded. How did you know? Little Eight opened his mouth, but the words were stuck in his throat and he changed his mind. I already knew. Her words were a little ambiguous, but Jian Fengqi did not hear it. He just thought that she had been here before. After all, with her temperament, she was really capable of doing such a thing. However, this place is so deserted. Jian Fengqi did not delve into it and looked around. There was no one else here except for the two of them. Since Herb Mountain was fully opened, people could go in and out freely and basically go anywhere. Basically, people would set foot in every corner of Herb Mountain. However, this place was deserted, as if no one had ever been here. Little Hachi shrugged. Who cares? Anyway, we found the things, just take them. How dare you? A voice full of anger suddenly came from behind the two of them. Jian Fengqi immediately looked back and saw Xu Jing standing not far away, looking down at the two of them. Her carefully drawn eyebrows were tightly knitted, and there was undisguised anger in her eyes. Jian Fengqi elbowed Little Hachi. Hey, the person you're looking for is here. Of course, Little Hachi had already recognized Xu Jing's voice. Her red lips curled into a perfect arc, and she slowly turned around. Eighth Oracle, what a coincidence! Her voice was still soft and delicate. Those who did not know better would think that she was greeting a good friend that she had not seen in a long time. However, this voice was particularly harsh to Xu Jing's ears. Her face was cold. You are really getting bolder and bolder. How dare you trespass here? Do you know where this is? Little Hachi said honestly. I know. Isn't this Herb Mountain? Wasn't it just opened not long ago? Why are we not allowed to come here now? Xu Jing was so angry that her whole body was trembling slightly. This is the private land of the Oracle. How can you step in as you please? Little Hachi and Jian Fengqi immediately understood. So this is your residence? I'm sorry, we really didn't know. Xu Jing was in charge of the affairs of Herb Mountain. She usually spent most of her time here. Even the other oracles did not set foot in this place. However, she never expected that these two people would come here just because she went back to the palace of the illusory god and came back a little late. You want to shirk responsibility just because you said you didn't know? Xu Jing was so angry that she laughed. Little Hachi spread her hands. Eighth Oracle, you said that this is your territory, but you didn't even leave a sign. Who would know? Xu Jing coldly reprimanded. Why not? The barrier outside. Chapter 23:31. Her voice stopped abruptly. She suddenly thought of something, and a look of shock flashed across her eyes. Number 8 turned around to take a look. Barrier? What barrier? There was nothing when we came. As she spoke, she looked at Jian Fengqi. Don't you think so? Jian Fengqi nodded. That's right. We didn't see any barrier. If there was, they wouldn't have come here so casually. Xu Jing looked up in disbelief. The barrier in the distance had indeed dissipated at some point. Xu Jing's heart sank. How could this be? That barrier had existed for tens of thousands of years, and such a situation had never happened before. Little Hachi's eyes flashed as she smiled. 8th Oracle, how long has it been since you came to Herb Mountain? How could you not know that your barrier has disappeared? Xu Jing pursed her lips tightly and didn't say anything. Then she said, in that case, I'll let you off this time. There won't be a next time. After saying that, she turned around and was about to leave. She seemed to be in a hurry, as if she was in a hurry to do something. Little Hachi suddenly stepped forward and chuckled. 8th Oracle, wait. Xu Jing turned around impatiently. What else do you have to say? If she wasn't in a hurry to confirm something, she wouldn't have let these two off so easily. Little Hachi said, it's not a big deal. Actually, it's not a big deal. I just have a few words that I want to talk to you about. Xu Jing frowned. What kind of medicine was this little 8 selling in his gourd? I don't have time to listen to your useless words. Xu Jing retracted her gaze and was about to leave. However, little Hachi's words made her stop in her tracks. 8th Oracle, I heard that you have been in charge of Herb Mountain for tens of thousands of years. Logically speaking, you should know every blade of grass, every tree, every mountain, and every river here the best. However, 8th Oracle, you don't seem to be doing a very good job. These words completely ignited the long-suppressed anger in Xu Jing's heart. She abruptly turned around and questioned sternly, what did you say? The Herb Mountain was what she cared about the most. In the past few years, she had been trying to seize more rights, wanting to completely take Herb Mountain as her own, and so on. It was not difficult to see this point. Therefore, she would never allow anyone to question her in this aspect. Previously, it was the God Monarch who had made a move. She was wary of him, so she obediently handed over all her authority. No matter how unwilling she was, she would never dare to go against that person. However, little Hachi was different. Who do you think you are? How dare you talk nonsense in front of me? Xu Jing was so angry that he didn't show any mercy with his words. Little Hachi was not annoyed. She raised her eyebrows and said, if the 8th divine emissary had cared about Herb Mountain in the slightest, then Herb Mountain wouldn't have ended up like this. Don't tell me you don't know that. Wind seeds and devil's snare that are more than 100 years old are all gone? Of course, Xu Jing knew. After all, she had kept a close watch on every single herb on Herb Mountain. However, she didn't care. So what? Then what about? Little Hachi repeated her words. The smile on her lips deepened, but a layer of frost gradually gathered in her eyes. She sneered. Heavenly treasures are extremely precious, but it is precisely because of this that they have to be taken care of carefully. In the end, you harvested all of them and didn't leave anything behind? 8th Oracle, even I understand this simple logic. How can you not understand it? The only explanation was that Xu Jing didn't think about taking good care of Herb Mountain at all. She just wanted to seize as many benefits as possible. Anyway, she definitely didn't lack herbs in her hands. As for the rest, she couldn't be bothered to care. Xu Jing was so angry that she laughed. She took a step forward and looked at little Hachi with contempt and ridicule. Since Herb Mountain is guarded by me, then it's not up to others to worry about these things. Whether Herb Mountain is good or bad, what does it have to do with you? Little Hachi's expression gradually turned cold. I know that you've recently broken through to Supreme Doctor and that it's time to show off. However, this illusory god palace doesn't lack a Supreme Doctor like you. Besides, you don't have a bloodline totem. Seeing the change in little Hachi's expression, Xu Jing was very pleased. During this period of time, she really had enough of all kinds of anger. She had long suppressed a stomach full of anger. Now that little Hachi had bumped into the muzzle of the gun, she naturally wouldn't let it go so easily. You and your arrogant and despotic master are just as annoying as you. You're just born lowly. Slap. Before Xu Jing could finish her words, her face was fiercely slapped. The loud and clear sound of the slap rang out, instantly freezing the surrounding space. Little Hachi had used all her strength in this slap, directly slapping Xu Jing's face to the side. It wasn't that she was weaker than Little Hachi, but she really didn't expect Little Hachi to suddenly make a move. Ever since Xu Jing became a god's messenger, she had always been high and mighty. When had she ever been slapped in the face like this? She covered the numb and painful half of her face and looked at Little Hachi in shock and anger. Without thinking, she raised her hand to counterattack, slapping towards Little Hachi's face. Little Adi clamped her wrist in a death grip. That pair of beautiful eyes, which had always been enchanting and seductive, was now filled with a biting cold. You dare to scold Master, I think you don't want to live anymore. Jian Fengqi, who was watching from the side, was also stunned for a while. My great-aunt, you're really fighting with a god's messenger? Just as he was about to persuade her, he suddenly felt that something was wrong with the surroundings. He lowered his head to take a look. Ripples suddenly appeared on the surface of the stream. The surrounding grass and trees swayed without wind. An indistinct and powerful aura was gradually revealed. Chapter 23:32. Shock flashed across Jian Fengqi's eyes. This pressure seemed to be coming from Little Hachi? But wasn't she the exalted god? How could she cause such a big commotion? However, Xu Jing was still angry and did not realize that something was wrong. She clamped down on Little Eight's wrist and raised her hand to hit him again. The sound of something breaking through the air suddenly came, and a folding fan hit her wrist hard. Xu Jing felt the pain and subconsciously let go of her hand. She looked at Jian Fengqi angrily. You! Jian Fengqi hurriedly said. Oh, I'm so sorry. I wanted to stop Little Hachi, but I didn't expect to hit you. Eighth Oracle, are you okay? Xu Jing was furious. Jian Fengqi was clearly helping Little Hachi. Could you two are really going to rebel? Little Hachi stared at Xu Jing. Her red lips curled into an enchanting smile, but her eyes were extremely cold. Oh, who did you say was going to rebel? Her voice was as soft and sweet as ever, but her tone now carried an indescribable majesty. Xu Jing's heart trembled as she subconsciously exchanged glances with Little Eight. She did not know why, but when she met those cold and smiling eyes, she suddenly felt a strong sense of uneasiness. Those eyes seemed to be able to see through everything, straight to the deepest part of her heart. The bellflowers swayed, the stream flowed faster, and the waves surged. Little Hachi said, Xu Jing, this herb mountain, you are not qualified to be in charge. Xu Jing was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. She screamed, If I'm not qualified, do you think you are? Little Hachi did not say anything and just stared at her. The letter hanging from her waist began to tremble slightly. The words on it were rich and bright, as if they were about to burst out of it. It seems that if I don't teach you a lesson today, you won't realize what you've done wrong. As soon as she finished speaking, Xu Jing's aura suddenly surged. However, Little Hachi's face did not show any signs of panic. Instead, the corners of her lips curled into a mocking smile. Jian Fengqi glanced at her and the corner of her eyes twitched. How could Little Hachi still smile at a time like this? She was really not afraid of offending Xu Jing. Jian Fengqi's figure moved, and he came to Xiaoba's side. He pulled her behind him and said softly, he whispered, Little Hachi, you're too bold. With this slap, how would Xu Jing take revenge on her? How would she continue living in the future? Little Eight, on the other hand, brushed his hair behind his back and smiled enchantingly. What's there to be afraid of? I'd like to see how she's going to teach me a lesson. Jian Fengqi was about to say something when he suddenly saw a barrier slowly appear not far away. The barrier was pale green and had some strange patterns engraved on it. After taking a closer look, Jian Fengqi realized that it was a Xian formation. However, This Xian formation was filled with countless patterns and lines. It was extremely complicated. If one looked at it for a long time, it would give them a headache. Jian Fengqi retracted his gaze. He was still a little shocked. Is that the barrier that the 8th divine envoy mentioned before? Little 8 turned around to take a look as a smile appeared in his eyes. Jian Fengqi did not see her current expression. He was worried, but he still looked at Xu Jing. If it was a divine envoy, the two of them would definitely not be able to defeat him. They had to think of a way. However, at this moment, the power surging from Xu Jing's body suddenly dissipated into the surroundings. The power that he had just gathered dissipated silently just like that. Xu Jing was shocked. He widened his eyes in disbelief and looked at his hands. The pressure that he had accumulated in his palms was also annihilated at this moment. She panicked for a moment. Then, she tried to mobilize the power around her body again. However, before she could do anything, the power dissipated again. Xu Jing's heart sank. Then, she suddenly thought of something and raised her head to look ahead. The barrier had reappeared at some point. The power that had dissipated from her body was also quietly surging toward the barrier. It was the barrier that was forcibly depriving her of power. Xu Jing felt as if a basin of cold water had been poured over her head. An indescribable chill suddenly surged from the bottom of her heart, causing her whole body to tremble slightly. This barrier, Jian Fengqi saw that her expression was not right. He also looked back and was shocked on the spot. Wasn't this the 8th divine envoy's barrier? Why did he suddenly turn around and attack her? Xu Jing suddenly turned around and left quickly. Her speed was very fast. Her footsteps were hurried, and there was a trace of panic and embarrassment in her back. Jian Fengqi blinked. She's leaving just like that? Didn't she say that she was going to teach them a lesson? And little Hachi's slap, was she going to take it for nothing? This 8th divine envoy is really interesting, Jian Fengqi said. He looked at little Hachi and asked with some concern. Although she's gone, with her personality, she definitely won't let today's matter go. Little Hachi smiled. What are you afraid of? She's like a clay Buddha crossing a river now. She can't even protect herself. How can she have the time to care about us? What do you mean? Look at that barrier. She's in charge of looking after the herb mountain, but she can't even control this. Little Hachi sneered. I thought she was very powerful. It turns out that she's just strong on the outside but weak on the inside. What a waste of my feelings. Jian Fengqi, little Hachi. Don't you think you're getting more and more arrogant? How many people dared to scold the 8th divine envoy like this? Yes, she didn't just scold her, she even slapped her. Jian Fengqi felt that Xu Jing had probably never been bullied like this before. Just look at her expression just now. It was as if she couldn't wait to tear little Hachi apart. Little Hachi blinked her beautiful eyes. Her thick and curly eyelashes trembled slightly like small fans. She looked around and said modestly, I didn't. Jian Fengqi trembled all over. He cupped his fist and took a step back. My dear lady, let's talk things over. His little heart was still trembling when he thought of little Hachi's slap just now. Little Hachi snorted softly and walked back while twisting her waist. Jian Fengqi thought for a while and followed her. He asked with some concern. By the way, I'm afraid that Xu Jing will really hold a grudge against us this time. Little Hachi yawned carelessly. She's always been like this. What's there to worry about? What if she comes back again? Little Hachi waved her hand. Then I'll be merciful and give her another slap. 2 slaps will do. Any more and it would hurt my hand. Little Hachi looked at her hand with heartache. Look at how thick-skinned she is. My fingernails were almost scratched. Jian Fengqi. As the two talked, they arrived in front of the barrier. Jian Fengqi suddenly thought of something. He looked back and saw that the surrounding vegetation gradually stopped swaying. The waves in the stream also gradually calmed down. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.